Hi everybody, Ryan here from Siege Airsoft, and today we're going to do a little bit of a rundown of my rifle setup here that I use at Siege and at most airsoft fields. Now a bit of history on me and why I'm making this video. So for those of you who don't know, I work here, I ref here, I do the design here in the videos obviously, and I've been playing airsoft for a long time. And I see a lot of new players and old players come and go, and especially when it comes to the rifle setups, they kind of lack a philosophy behind it. And I don't mean you need to know everything about everything, but there needs to be a rhyme or reason of why you do stuff, right? So a lot of the knowledge that is on rifle setup and guns comes from things like video games or movies or incorrect information on YouTube, especially pertaining to an airsoft context, right? So unlike video games, there's no stat bar that goes up and down based on what you put on. Putting on a laser or a light doesn't increase like your hip fire or do whatever that stuff, or if you're into anime like a pentagram, or if you're into the weirder anime, there's like measurements. But putting stuff on and attachments in real life and for an airsoft context is different. There is a rhyme or a reason to get these things. Maybe there's some things you don't need, you can save money on, spend it somewhere else. We do want to get into that. For me, I'm not really a collector of airsoft guns. I only really own two rifles, which is going to be this M4 and that AK sitting in the back, blurring in the background over there. I like to make these work for me, not me work for them. I like to maintain a master grip. I like to hold them the same, present them the same. And the context of me as a player, I do go to milsims, I play tournaments, I play obviously in here, just skirmish games, and I want my rifle to do all those things and do them all well. These are only tools on the field, and we want to use those tools to have fun. Let's talk about kit, right? Let's talk about kit, let's talk about how to break it down, how to kind of put stuff on your rifle, and how to really think about what we put on, so when we go out there, we don't have to think about it. On the bottom of the pyramid, before we even get started on the gun itself, you want to make sure that you have all the good stuff to run your gun. So that means good batteries. I always recommend changing your batteries to a Dean's or an XT60 connector to get a better connection than the crappy Tamiya connectors that the airsoft industry can't seem to move past. And good magazines. There's no more frustrating thing on the field than coming onto the field with a gun, putting a mag in, and it either has feeding issues because of crappy magazines or crappy BBs. Personally, for M4s, I only run these Maple Airsoft PMags. I really like them. They feed really nice, especially when you put the Z follower in them. They're durable, they look cool, and they're pretty affordable. Indoors, this guy, I run 2.8s. Outdoors, I run 0.32s or 0.33s. Those are the weights that I like. The reason why I don't really run 2s or 2.5s is I have a MR hop in here, a maple leaf rubber. It's pretty aggressive on those BBs. The sweet spot for it is really small. Another reason is because, well, yes, it's CQB. Sometimes you do want to get those like cross field shots from Vice City all the way to the mansion, and those do require nicer BBs to get those groupings nice and tight. Outdoors, it matters even more. Heavy BBs and good BBs will get you good range, good groupings, and it'll also cut through bush and wind resistance. So there are some considerations to take into account with BB choice and good magazines before we get into this stuff. First, we're going to start off with the base kind of rifle length considerations and other things that go into maybe choosing a gun. I don't really want to get into brands. Personally, I'm a big VFC simp. I really like VFCs. But you can go on Reddit and debate that endlessly with a bunch of other Redditors there about what brand is best and what brand makes the best stock gun with 18-1 gears and some ferrite motor, okay? Now, what kind of rifle do you want to buy, right? So for me, I like M4s and AKs. And the reason that is because, first of all, they're pretty ubiquitous. There's a lot of kit made for them, which is one part of aftermarket support, is getting magazine pouches for your guns and different kind of chest rigs and carriers. Another thing is going to be aftermarket support. And this is especially important inside Canada where we operate. Because of C21, the CBSA clamping down on stuff, it is getting harder to find parts for things. So if things break, like, God forbid, receivers or whatever, or internal parts, it's easy to find standard V2, V3 parts. It's easy to find magazines, for example. And those things are important to me because as we use these items, they will get worn, they will break over time, and things need to be repaired, replaced, upgraded. And having a good selection of upgrades is really important to making sure that this thing stays healthy for a long time. This receiver itself is, I think, over 10 years old. It's one of VFC's older receivers, and this upper is about 10 years old. With good care and all that stuff, these things can last you quite a long time and really do you good out there. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the same gun in my older gun setup video, and I haven't really changed it too much. The receiver itself is a cool VFC Colt receiver with a DD upper, kind of Gucci. I do like trades, with an 11-inch barrel. Pretty simple. Other than the gearbox and the things I just listed, everything else is pretty much aftermarket. The internals, the grip, all that stuff. Now, let's get into kind of the length of the rifle and other things in consideration to that, because that's probably going to be the first thing that comes to mind. For me, I'm 5'11", not 6 foot. Sorry for all you Tinder girls out there. but I do like, in terms of rifle length, something between the lengths of around 8 and 14 inches. Now, some people like running tiny little PDWs out there, and some people like running Munga Chunga DMRs and staying in spawn and not shooting anything. Whatever you like, this is the length that works for me. And there's a few considerations to that when it comes to efficiency and comfort. Now, comfort, right? I used to run like little PWs, little tiny guns. And what I found for me is that I would do what we call shrimping up. And shrimping up is, if you look at the shape of a shrimp, they're all kind of curled up like this, especially when you cook them, right? So I don't really like that. While PWs are really nice and easy to fit through doors, they're small, they're maneuverable, I like to be comfortable when I'm shooting, especially over long periods of time in a mil sim. Sometimes the bad posture can cause more pain than a heavy gun. On the vice versa, having something really long and really big is heavy. And if you're going to a mil sim for 18, 20, 30 hours, or if you're in the cold or in inclement weather, or you have to do weird stuff, holding something heavy and super big is not comfortable. I like to keep a relaxed and natural position when I'm shooting. I'm lazy, and I find that the carbine length gives me that option to keep nice and extended. If I need to move through areas like doors or buildings or small areas like that, practicing your high readies, your low readies, your compresses, moving the weapon around you and all that stuff really helps you to maneuver through tight areas and different kind of spaces like that you have to negotiate, especially inside a field like Siege, where there's lots of different kinds of cover to move around. Now, efficiency and movement is only one part of the efficiency equation for the length considerations of this airsoft gun. And that goes down into the efficiency of the gun itself. And that means having a good balance of barrel, spring, and the motor. So you want your barrel to be a decent length, so that way the BB has time to accelerate and get to velocity. You don't want to run the heaviest spring in the world, so that way you don't put stress on your motor and you don't have really bad trigger response, your motor gets super hot, or you start frying your batteries because your motor is drawing too much amps, right? So when you have a little tiny gun, you have a little tiny barrel. And that inner barrel doesn't allow the BB to accelerate at a meaningful rate, which means you have to compensate for that by running a really heavy spring, right? Let's say like an M130 or something like that. With that heavy spring, your motor needs to work harder to pull that spring back to accelerate that BB at a meaningful velocity. Meaningful velocity doesn't mean it needs to go 300 million FPS. It means it just has to accelerate the BB enough for where you're comfortable with, because velocity, FPS, or joules is part of the equation of getting good groupings and a good distance with your gun. You obviously want to stay within field limits, but having a little bit more FPS to play with means that you can use heavier BBs, better groupings, take advantage of your hop up, and obviously have a better playing experience. So for me, I found that an inner barrel between the lengths of 285 millimeters to maybe 320, 363, the kind of that classic M4 length, gives the BB a good time to accelerate, so you don't have to use a super heavy spring inside your gun. Therefore, your motor doesn't have to turn it really hard or work really hard, draw a lot of power from your battery, get super hot, use up a lot of power to accelerate that BB. And this, to me, is a really nice balance between the three. I'm able to get this gun shooting at 377 FPS, which is just under a field limit, without using too much battery juice and with keeping the motor decently cool and the gun sounding good and getting a good trigger response. Now that we got the length considerations out of the way, let's go butt to tip for all you power bottoms out there. So, on the butt, I'm running a Magpul CTR. The reason I like the CTR is, first of all, it's not too expensive, it's really readily available, and it offers me a lot of sling mounting options. So for those of you who like to run it through the buffer tube, there's a hole here. If you like to use QDs, there's a hole here. I like to kind of hard point it over here and run it back to front, like in my sling video. For those of you who haven't watched that, please check it out. Set up your slings properly, people. Now, there's other reasons why I like the CTR. It's slim. I don't really like stocks with a lot of cheek on them because I'm wearing Face Pro, or sometimes I'm wearing my gas mask or my respirator. I like to keep it slim here. I don't like more material there. I like to bring that stock up so it's not pushing out on it. Other things that you can buy for this gun if you want are risers and things like that if you need, or extended butt pads if you like that. This stock is great for AEGs because, to me, it's a toolless removal, and I'm running buffer tube batteries. I don't like running those huge external batteries. Personally, I think it's a bit of a cope when you can't get your gun to sound good without a giant battery. I like to run buffer tube batteries because they're slim. I can carry like 20 of them in my person for longer games, and they're easy to fit anywhere, really. You can take the stock off pretty easily by just pulling these two tabs. You don't need any Allen keys or tools or screwdrivers, and you can take out and slip in a new battery as you need, which you might need to do at longer games. So that's a pretty big consideration for me. For my grip, it's changed from a PTS grip to a VFC BCM grip. And the reason I went with the VFC BCM grip, other than cool points, is because it's a bit slimmer, the angle is a bit more aggressive, but it still maintains good motor angle. And motor angle is something really important and not often talked about when it comes to setting up a grip for airsoft. So what motor angle means is, for most V2 guns, your motor is going to be sitting inside this grip. That's why they call it a motor grip. If you have a crappy motor angle, this means that the pinion gear on the motor kind of sits either too far this way or that way. Your gun starts to sound like a dying capybara. And that's bad because it strips your gears, makes your gun sound like crap, makes your motor heat up really fast. So the grips that I kind of recommend are usually the grip that your gun comes with, has good motor angle. VFC A2s, PTS grips are pretty good, and these VFC new BCM grips are pretty good. I don't like grips with finger grooves or things like that, or rubberized grips. First of all, rubberized grips, I really hate the way they grab onto my hand and they seem to attract every living piece of dust on the planet. I like just plastic with a nice kind of stippling or a nice kind of aggressive texture. I'm usually wearing gloves, but I want that grip to kind of grip into the glove. I also don't like finger grooves, and I find that finger grooves give me the illusion of ergonomics. It's the grip telling me how to hold it versus me kind of choking up on the grip and holding it nice and high. I like getting a high and tight grip, and also having a little bit of a beaver tail helps out with that. I don't have super giant paws, so this kind of stock kind of beaver tail that the AR kind of comes with is not super great. I find that it has a gap, and having a little bit of a beaver tail here fills that gap up, gives me a more natural grip. As well, having a super steep grip like an A2, it's not a super huge deal I find, but some people really don't like that because you have to really cant your wrists or do some weird stuff with it. Having a neutral grip, especially in the front where your fingers go, is nice. So that's my considerations for grip. Keep it simple, no finger grooves, good motor angle, nice stippling, no rubbery stuff, and a little bit of a beaver tail, and then you have a good grip for me. Now let's go from the bottom to the top, and that's going to be my Optic. Now, if you saw my older video, this Optic hasn't changed too much in terms of its setup. I'm running a Knight's Armament skyscraper mount, and those things over there, nods, are kind of the reason for that, so I can have a more upright head posture. As well, I sometimes run a respirator or a gas mask, and having a little bit more height gives me a bit more room to work with when I'm wearing something bigger like that. However, I know high mounts are all the rage right now, and your favorite hypebeast company is making some super crazy high ones, but you do want to take into account some consideration when it comes to high mounts. I don't really think that high mounts help with keeping your head upright because you can just move the rifle upright. I'm going to probably put a video of me just doing ready positions with a normal, what we call a lower 1/3 co-witness mount, and I can just do ready ups and stuff just fine without having to crane and shrimp my neck. High mounts, you have to take into account more height over bore. And what that means is you notice the bore of the gun is over here, and the height of the optic is over here. Now, if you zero this properly, which you should zero to at range, this means you need to aim significantly above your target at close range to hit it. If you're not practicing with that, it can cause issues, so don't expect the high mount to just be like a drop-in solution to solve your shrimping problems. There are trade-offs, as with everything in life. If you do buy a high mount, you need to practice more with your height over bore. If you're shooting around cover or you're shooting people really up close, you need to aim a lot higher to compensate for that. So if I'm shooting somewhere from, let's say, me to the camera, I'm probably going to need to aim at someone's head to hit them in the chest. And that's something you need to think about. It's not like video games where the BB or the bullet just teleports to the middle of the dot. You do need to take into account that these are physical objects with physics to them. So this height over here is significant, especially for this riser, which is like 2.3 inches. If you bring the dot down, your height over bore becomes less significant, and you have to compensate less for that. So don't just go buying high risers because it's cool. Have a purpose for them, and if you buy a high riser, practice with it, play with it, train with it, get used to it, so that way you're not like calling out people for not calling your hits because you're probably hitting either above them or you're hitting a piece of cover, you're not hitting them at all. It's something to really consider when it comes to high mounts. Now on to what's on top of my riser, and that is going to be a little bit different from last time. Not too different, it's the same brand of optic. Before I had a Holosun 403B. I believe this one is a 403C with the primary arms ACSS reticle. Now, why real optics over repro optics? I find that Holosun or some of the Vortex selections kind of bridge that gap nicely. Repro optics aren't super cheap nowadays. You can usually find them maybe for 60, 100, 150 even for the nicer repros, but a good real steel budget object like a Vortex Crossfire or Holosun is within the $200 range. And that might seem like a lot, but I'd rather people buy a nice optic that works really well, that's reliable, has good battery life, good glass clarity. You don't have to worry about the zeroing knobs twisting off and all that stuff, versus like buying a second rifle they'll never use, or a pistol they'll never use, or some other items that they'll never use, or like a crappy tack vest or something. You don't have to go all the way like buy an aim point or buy an EOTech, but something like a Holosun or a Vortex is generally a good starting point to get more serious into nicer accessories. This Holosun is great. It has an ACSS reticle. It combines kind of the donut style reticle of an EOTech with also the durability and the footprint and the mounting compatibility with aim point style optics. I like it a lot for that. I know some people don't like to run an optic, but I like to actually aim and not trace my BBs in. I know that's a legitimate tactic that you can use in airsoft, but I like aiming for first round hits. It's more efficient. BBs are getting more expensive. I'm a cheap asshole. I don't like to buy lots of BBs. I don't like to use my tracer to aim because tracers work both ways. I like to just put my dot up, find it really quick, pull the trigger, be able to hit the guy that I'm shooting, and that's that. Especially if you're running nods or if you're playing a lot of low light games, an optic is pretty much essential because otherwise you'd have to either turn on your flashlight to shoot or you're not really sure or seeing what you're shooting at all. So having an illuminated reticle is really nice. Now, what brightness do I like to run this dot? I like to run it one stop brighter than you think you need. I don't like it to be just barely visible. I like to bring it to my eye and it's visible under all the lighting conditions that I'm playing at. So outdoors, pretty bright. Indoors, I obviously run it dimmer, but still just a little bit brighter than you think you need. And the reason for that is if I use my flashlight, I don't want my light washing on my dot. I want to maintain that nice, clear, crisp image and be sure that I still see my dot with my light on and that when I'm picking it up, it's not like, oh, I got to fish for it or it's barely visible. It's just bam, up there. I can shoot, find that dot, no problem. Dots are also really good as reference points. You can use it to reference the corner that you're pieing to. You can use it to get really quick peeks, prep behind your sight, peek out, shoot them really quick. I've actually seen a lot of traditionally people not using red dots moving on to red dots because they realize the potential behind a red dot and all its use cases. With a red dot too, you shoot with both eyes open. You don't need to squint one eye to shoot because that dot is projected to basically infinity. So you want to keep both eyes open, keep that peripheral vision when you're using it, and that's super important at airsoft. As well, when I'm going around shooting, I'm not always sighted in. I'm kind of at a relaxed low ready or compressed ready, and I can just snap to that dot and shoot whenever I need to shoot. It's pretty simple. Gives me options in the field. I like them, use them, get good with them, kill shots only, all that good stuff. Now, you might have noticed also I'm running Ironsights on here. They're backups. I don't really use them that often, but I do practice with them sometimes. If you're going to be running backup Ironsights, practice with them, get used to them, zero them as well. You do sometimes need to zero the windage and the elevations and all that stuff on the irons as well. And you want to make sure that your irons are good to go. Now, the sight radius of my irons is super short. I don't like having it here because it gets in the way of my hand, but they don't take up enough room to really matter. It's about the same as a pistol, so I don't really find for airsoft engagement distances the sight radius is super, super important and allows me to shoot under my cac riser, which is nice. So backup irons, have them. Not super necessary, especially with modern red dots, but why not? They don't take up that much room, so it doesn't really hurt anybody to have them. So in terms of slings, I like to run a 2-point sling. I've been running them ever since I really started playing airsoft. Do they make you slower? I don't really believe so. Why would I run a sling? Slings are really important. They keep the gun to your body. Now in airsoft, you're sometimes playing objective-based games. In milsims and scenario nights, sometimes you need to medic people. I want to be able to put that gun down, hook it around my pistol, put it on my back or something like that, deal with the objective that'll actually win us the game versus like being ultra maneuverable. In my opinion, if you practice with it, it doesn't really slow you down. If you don't like the 2-point sling, you can go with a 1-point. That really doesn't slow you down at all, and that gun's still on your body. Yeah, might slap you in the nuts every time you want to run around, but some trade-offs, trade-offs with everything. So this over here is a 2-point sling that's made by a local maker. I don't think I can disclose who made it yet, but they might be available in the market soon. They're pretty similar to a Ferro sling steer, but there are some things that I like about it a little bit more. I find that the pad is a little bit more maneuverable. It's a bit thinner, which is nice, especially because this gun's not super heavy. I like the sling a lot. I've been using it for about a year now. It's a great sling. How I like to set my sling up is I like to keep it back to front, which is more of like side to side. So this side of the sling is on the opposite side of this side, and that allows me to transition without choking myself as much. I also like to run hooks instead of QDs. I've had QDs, especially airsoft, crappy repro QDs, fail on me, and I also don't really like the fact that they rotate. Hooks don't rotate as much. They only have a set degree of rotation, and they're not super loud if you put a sling silencer on them. I also like to run this Magpul RSA, which is a rail sling attachment on the top, because when I put the gun down, I find that it falls down the best when it's up here, and also it's like not wearing into the rail, into unnecessary positions and things like that. Now the rail setup in front has kind of changed a bit. Over here, I'm running just this kind of little piece of one wrap cordage kind of thing. If I need to put stuff here, I put stuff there. So, sometimes I ran a pressure switch. I wanted to pull it out for whatever reason. So I just wrapped it here. Or if I want to wrap my sling up, sometimes I'll wrap it there, or any other miscellaneous tiny things like a glow stick or something. Sometimes I just want to put it there for quick access. Doesn't really hurt my grip or anything like that. Doesn't hurt to have it there. If you want to put a Ranger band there or even electrical tape, it's just nice to have it in an area where you can really, really quickly access it without any problems. Now the rail that I'm running is a CNC Tac 11-inch URGI rail. Pretty simple, hasn't changed from my last video. I like this rail a lot. good length. It's actually holding up super, super well. It's not super worn. The anodizing is doing really great. Fits on there really well. Minimal seam. No issues with it. It's a metal tube, guys. You don't have to really go into like, I like this rail, I like that rail, I like that rail. As long as it sits straight, it mounts well, easy to install, easy to remove if you need to remove it. Holds a decent amount of zero with the laser and stuff like that if you're using a laser. Doesn't really matter. They're just aluminum tubes with rectangle slots cut in them if you're going M-LOK or Picatinny. Now, the rails that I would recommend are going to be, like I said earlier, M-LOK or Picatinny. Key mod, if you have it, don't change it out for no reason, but there is less and less accessories made for key mod. Most stuff now is either made for M-LOK or Picatinny, and having, like I said, good aftermarket support is really important. I like M-LOK rails because they're thin. Unlike real steel, I don't have to really worry about heat and all that stuff, or heat dissipation, or rail flexing under heat, or zero shifts and stuff like that. Airsoft guns tend to stay pretty cool, except if you have a crap shim job and your motor is heating up like, the pits of hell. But having a nice slim grip allows me to get my hand around the grip and positive control. Onto the hand stuff. So I took off my foregrip. Not that it was bad, it's just my shooting style has kind of changed. I like running this slick grip over here with these BCM rail covers. BCM rail covers like 20 bucks. They're super cheap. You might as well buy the real ones. How I find that I shoot my gun nowadays, I don't really pull into myself. I kind of punch out with this hand and pull with this hand and push back with this hand. Give it a try sometimes. It actually works. And when I have a grip there, it doesn't really help me out because I'm putting the pressure forward and usually the grip is on the rear, so it's not really super helpful for me. Additionally, when I'm moving my hands up and down the rail, depending on the shooting stance I'm in, not having a grip really helps me out with that. So that's pretty nice. If you are running a grip, I tend to like to set up the grip where I'm holding my pistol, just like I'm setting up these rail panels where I hold my pistol. That way I maintain that master grip. Grips do help also if you have a lot of switches on your gun, pressing down, giving you a point of pivot for it. So that's really up to you. I just personally don't really run grips anymore. If you want to run grips, just make sure you set it up properly. Don't be gripping your gun here. Don't set up your foregrip here and or setting up like super far that you have to have like spaghetti arms to reach it. Maintain a good philosophy for your grip. Pretty much if you draw your pistol, move it back, that's where your foregrip should be. It's really easy. That way when you do a pistol draw or when you do a rifle presentation, it's the same rep with the support hand. You don't need to worry about it too much. And if you're naturally comfortable here, then you're going to be naturally comfortable there as well. So in terms of grip and kind of the front end setup, this is going to be your switch or your button setup in the front. Now my switch setup, I'm kind of experimenting with something new. That's pretty much the degree of experimentation I'll do. Normally I run 2 pressure switches up here. I'll probably pull a picture of that. I run my flashlight over here and my laser back here. There's a few reasons why I changed it up to a pressure pad over here, or pressure switch on the back of the light, over here instead of a pressure pad here. The first reason is my pressure pad's on my AK right now and I'm too cheap to buy another one and I don't really want to run a repro pressure pad on my real light. The other reason is when I found myself using this gun, especially a lot with nods, moving my grip back to use my laser. We were at a game at PRZ called Bloody Road, and the buildings inside there are dark as heck. Like they're super, super dark. Like even with night vision, even with like really nice tubes, you're not having much light for those tubes to actually amplify. So I was going IR hot a lot, and IR means infrared light, which the visible eye can't see, but it's like a flashlight for your night vision. And I had to move my grip a little bit back, and I found that super uncomfortable. So I moved it up. So this pressure switch, this is a mod light mod button, controls this laser unit. I'll get into that in a bit. And then I moved a just momentary cap. This is an Airsoft momentary cap on this light over here. Now, switch setup in front. I could do a whole video on this, but I'm going to go over this somewhat quickly. If you're holding a pencil, where do most people hold their pencil? They don't hold their pencil at the top and try to write like this. They hold it where the pencil needs to go, at the tip, right? So I'm holding my gun at the tip. This is kind of like your steering wheel of your gun. Now, I don't like holding the gun here because of a few reasons. First of all, you don't have really good proprioception of where the barrel is. A lot of times when people hold their gun here, what I noticed at Siege is that they tend to stick their barrel out further than they need to. So when you're going through a room or you're posted up on a door, the person coming in attacking you sees the barrel. And that's what we call free lunch. They can make an action there. They can shoot your gun, get your gun out, and then shoot you. Or sometimes, you'll get lazy and you'll move up, and that person will come in and tag you out in the hand or some of that. It's nasty. That's why I like to maintain a really aggressive grip. When I have good muzzle awareness, I'm flagging my muzzle less through threshold, so I don't really need to worry about if my gun's sticking out too far, because if my hand's not sticking out too far, chances are my muzzle is behind cover as well. That way I'm not telegraphing the enemy to where my position is, and it's better. Now, other things to consider are ambidextrous setups, right? So in Airsoft, you will be solo a lot of the times because Airsoft is kind of a pick up and play game by the nature of the sport, and you will need to switch hands. Now, real life might be different, but Airsoft, you will need to switch hands, and being an ambi shooter means you're a good shooter. Being a non-ambi shooter means you're only one half of a good shooter. So This setup is relatively ambidextrous. It was more ambidextrous before when I had 2 pads at the top. So I just need to reach a little bit over if I want to engage my white light. It's not a huge deal, but it's something you want to consider. What you don't want to have is like your switches not be ambi at all. You want to have some degree of ambi access with your switches. That's why most people tend to put their switches on top, because on top on the 12 o'clock, you can switch hands and you can press the buttons on both sides, right? If they're on either side, you have to either reach forward or you can't do it at all. For this light, like I said earlier, I do have to reach forward a bit, but it's something that I can work through. It's not a huge deal. And this weapon is set up a little bit more for that night fighting setup, which you will be switching hands a little bit less. But if you're doing a lot of day fighting, or you're doing a lot of fighting inside Siege, where there's lots of corners, lots of angles of attack, you will need to transition quite a bit. If I can set up everything on the 12 o'clock on my gun, and if you look at a clock, the 12's at the top, if I can set up everything on the top, I would. So, why is my laser and my light in this position other than the fact that it looks cool? Why not at the bottom, right? So the reason I don't really like accessories on the bottom is because when I grip my gun like this, if I move it, have a really aggressive grip over here, that gets in the way of the grip, right? Another reason why is if I'm resting my gun on something, so let's say I'm resting on a piece of cover, I don't want this laser box here or this flashlight here that I'm resting it on. I don't want to be resting it on these weird, bumpy, uneven surfaces. This is about as even of a surface as I'm going to get, right? So when I'm resting a gun down there, I want to be low to the cover. I don't want to be above the cover. And I want to be able to have a nice resting position on my handguards. That's why I don't recommend mounting accessories on the bottom. I tend to stick on the top half of the gun, which is going to be the 3 to the 9. And then I like mounting stuff on the 45, keeping this as tight as possible. That way you're not flagging too much of the gun or telegraphing too much of yourself when you're doing peaks. It also keeps it nice and slim and maneuverable. If you're getting really aggressive, you need to grip around the whole thing, you can do that, and you don't have to really worry about it so much. Now on to the accessories of the front. So this light hasn't changed. This is my ARISOCKET E2 XT. Probably going to do a more detailed light breakdown in the future with comparisons. So comment below if you want to see that. But this is a really nice light. First of all, it takes 16 650 batteries, which are basically rechargeable double CR123s, same form factor but rechargeable. That's really nice. Or it can take 2 CR123s, so I have that dual fuel option. It has a momentary tail cap, like I said before. So if I press this, it turns on. If I let go, it turns off. And you want your light to be momentary. I don't like lights that are constant only because sometimes you don't want to leave your light on if you're moving around. You want to be able to control when you turn it on and control when you turn it off. A lot of people think of light switches or lights in Airsoft as a beacon to yourself and they don't use them often enough. Don't think of them like that. Think of them as a light switch you get to control. I also don't like lights with many modes or strobe. Strobe is cool, kind of distracting for new players, but experienced players, they'll shoot through that strobe like nobody's business. And also I'm not like clicking through modes where I'm like, oh crap, I want it constant, oh crap, I want it strobe. It's just on or off, super simple. Also the reason I don't like modes for that reason, I don't want to turn it on and be low, turn it on and be high. I just want to turn it on, have that maximum output, and you're good to go. On the topics of where to mount my flashlight as well, I like to mount my flashlight as far forward as possible. As you can see, it's pretty much flush with the muzzle over here. You can run it a little bit back, but you want to run your light far forward. And the reason that is if you run it back here, I don't care if you have like a quadrillion lumen, Olight, Zeus, Odin, or whatever, a lot of that output is going to be occluded by the barrel shadow. So you want to have that light far forward so that the shadow of the barrel and the handguard doesn't occlude your light beam. That way you're maximizing the output of your light. Lights is a whole huge other topic, but basically for me, I do want a pretty throwy light. This light is super throwy. It's like 55,000 or something candela. Also, what's nice about it is the bezel of this light screws off, so you can take a T1 protector. You want to make sure that you protect any forms of glass at the front of your gun. You might have the coolest warranty in the world, but that warranty don't mean jack when you're out on the field and this thing gets shot and then you have to operate at night or do other cool stuff. So when you're out on the field, this thing gets shot, at least your protector saves you, right? And also these things are expensive. Even if you have a cool warranty, just protect it. It's insurance. So I run night vision, as you can see down there. And with night vision, you do want a good laser and illuminator. This is an all-in-one unit. This is a HoloSun LS321G with a visible laser that I barely use, as well as an IR laser and an IR light, which I use often. What I like about this is that it's readily available in Canada. In Canada, we can't always get the super Gucci D-bells and PECs really easily, or they're super gray market. Don't want to really go into that, but this one you can buy it legitimately. It has pretty decent customer support, mounts on nice, takes standard kind of crane switches, so I can use this mod button no problem. And what I do like about this over, let's say like the D-ball, is that everything except for the battery switching is in the rear. So I can focus the illuminator in the rear. I can change all this stuff without having to go on top. That's really great. Also, the laser unit here, the illuminator and the IR laser are slaved, which means that you can take a screwdriver and zero it to this dot, and that's generally what I do. And it's good enough, and you don't need to worry about playing with lots of dials and nubs and stuff like that. So for a lot of new players, they're like, ooh, I want to get a laser sight and increase my hip fire or whatever. Lasers over here, you don't want to buy one unless you're running night vision, basically. Most fields don't allow visible lasers for good reason, and that's because a lot of lasers that are super cheap, made in China. I mean, this one's made overseas, but it is by a reputable company. If it's not rated, it's super cheap made there. First of all, that laser might not be eye safe. And lasers are much more dangerous than that one guy shooting a BB, hopefully not, at your field going 5 FPS over. That's an insurance thing. This is a legitimate safety thing. If you don't have an eye-safe laser, people's eyes can actually get damaged. So if you're getting a laser, make sure you get an eye-safe one. You will be paying for that cost. But if you don't need a laser, if you're not running night vision, don't get a laser. They're expensive, they're heavy, there's no reason to get them. You can basically use that money to either buy more magazines, more BBs, more play sessions, Airsoft 101, all that stuff. Necessary things versus this, which is kind of like the luxury of luxury goods on your rifle. Now in the front of the gun, you might notice this little can device. I don't really like running super long suppressors and cans unless I'm running the barrel all the way through to hide it, because there are kind of baffle strikes in Airsoft. I want my first shot coming out there, not hitting any part of the barrel, and making sure that it's getting on target. Second of all, it actually helps me hear the sound of the gun with ear pro on to make sure that it's empty. When an AEG is empty, it doesn't stop shooting like a real gun or a gas gun. So when an AEG is empty, it still shoots, but the pop or the sound signature of that pop is different, and then you reload, right? So this helps me differentiate the sound signature a lot better with ear pro on, and it just looks sweet. And the third reason I run this is because when I'm playing outdoors, this offers me kind of a protection and shield against dirt and stuff getting inside the flash hider and impeding my shots. So that's just a consideration of why I run an amp on this gun. Thanks for watching this video, everybody, and remember the fight against C21 is still ongoing, so be sure to check out the links down below for ASIC and Friends and how to help save Airsoft in Canada. Like always, get good, play hard, be an upstanding member of the community. Always look after new players before yourself if you can. Teach them, guide them, give them good advice, be a good person. Obviously, respect these things. Don't take them out to public. We're all representatives of the community right now, and it's super important time for us to come together. And with that, we will see you on the next one.